Hey, everybody. Welcome to ISA Presents How to Get Your Film Financed. I am Shayna Weber, Creative Executive over at ISA. And we're super excited because I think that you're all here for a really good hour of information that is practical. So I would like to introduce Poya Shohani. Poya is an independent film producer and private capital advisor. I'm going to throw it to you, Poya, to talk about a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Thank you, and nice to meet everyone. So I'm a primarily work within entertainment in terms of financing film projects, packaging them, and advising filmmakers on how to put those packages together. I came from the creative side, actually, which was fun, but then I was thrown into the capital raising side, and then eventually ended up running the funds along with my other partners. And it's been an interesting journey up until this point. And I'm here to share some of that knowledge to kind of hopefully provide good information for everyone here who can take something away from this and be able to package their projects in an efficient way where you'll be able to hopefully benefit and get your projects financed and distributed.
Amazing. I feel like we just want to set the ground rules for everybody in this. What we want to do in this hour is really demystify, when we talk about film financing. I know we've all gone to panels, we've all gone to events where it feels like you're looking for practical information and you're getting $30 million budget answers and sort of like the runaround from people who are in big companies and have major deals and have partnerships. And what we're really trying to do here is sort of, start at that point where you have a script, whether you're a screenwriter, filmmaker, or producer. You have a great script. You have something good. You have your pitch deck ready. Then what do you do? Because I feel like we're all sitting down, sort of going like, okay, I'm ready to go. What do I do? So that's kind of where we're starting from today. So Poya, let's first talk about what kinds of filmmakers or projects most often come to you for guidance.
Sure. It's usually quite early stage on. Projects that have a script or a pitch deck and a script together, and they've been trying to kind of find their way across the landscape of getting this project kind of made, and they've gone through various different doors. A lot of them tend to shut down purely because, again, when it comes to packaging, it's about your positioning, it's about your framing, it's about how you're presenting your project and how well you really know the business side of it. I think one of the things that tends to get missed here is a passion is one thing, and having that level of passion for your project is great, but one thing we tend to generally look at as well is how well is your project as a business, as an investment ready. And that's, I think, a lot of the times where filmmakers tend to have a shortfall because again, not their fault. The atmosphere around financing projects can be quite daunting, and it's relatively quite complex once you really get into it. So I'm hopefully here to be able to demystify all of that.
Awesome. So let's just start with, what does packaging really mean? What does that mean?
Sure. So a good package looks like is a good script, obviously a script that, in the modern day, as we say, is a script that also includes some product placements across it. So it kind of feels that natural. In the real world that we're in, we're surrounded by product placements, whether we like it or not, and having that reflected in there, having that identified. Secondly, your pitch deck has to not have, it's partially it's about the vision that you have as a director or as a writer, but it's also about the realistic budgets in there, realistic outline of how the capital structure is to look like. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Love to discuss about the correct kind of way of looking at capital structures. Outside of that is a realistic vision for your film. Sometimes it can be overinflated, sometimes it's not big enough and you need to think bigger. So when it comes to a package, having a good budget, a sensible budget, a sensible pitch deck that outlines the vision and the business case that you're making. Looking towards getting some sort of a very soft LOI from a distributor is always a good way to move forward. We don't expect you to have a distribution deal at that point, but to show some sort of a letter of interest from a distributor where they say, hey, look, we're interested. However, subject to you getting fully financed, or subject to you getting financed and having the cast and everything else in place, we're absolutely interested to have a look at this project later down the line.
Mm-hmm.
What that does for us as financiers, that generally tends to validate the project, market validation of the project, meaning, yes, there is some interest for this project to potentially be purchased by the following distributor. Having those things in place goes a long, long way in terms of a package that is that gets financed. Now, if you have more, if you have potential interested cast, get
Mm-hmm.
why, or you have some sort of a correspondence email that you can take a snapshot of and show that, hey, they are interested. However, it's just subject to the full financing or what have you. All those pieces create a investable package.
Okay, so let's just sort of like if we were doing bullet points. So I want to talk about distributors and
Mm-hmm.
kind of like what that means, but also when somebody comes to you specifically, what you're saying is that they should probably invest in having a budget and schedule made, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, just so it's that would quantify realistic.
Correct.
Because some people might think that their film is $1 million when realistically it's $6 million, right?
Correct.
And so, okay. So number one, invest in a line producer who can create an actual budget for you so that you have a realistic idea of what you're doing. Also, the distributor angle. So I know a lot of us filmmakers are like, okay, you're saying to go get interest from a distributor. How do you do that?
Right. It's a good question. And it's sometimes a lot simpler than people think. It
Okay.
seems a bit daunting. I mean, I was
Yes.
there. It's like, go to a distributor, right? How do I reach out to a distributor? How do I make those connections kind of happen? Where do I even begin?
Right. What do you need to send to them? Yeah.
Yeah, correct. So usually, I mean, right now in this modern day, and with social media in terms of kind of LinkedIn and other aspects are there, you have a lot of access to decision makers or people who work within those departments of, for instance, the Sonys, the Warners, the Universals, and many others. And now with the advancements of AI, it's there to help you kind of filter what you kind of require and who you really need to kind of reach out to. It can be that indicator of where to go and what to do, but generally when you reach out, it can be very straightforward as, hey, I have a script about the following thing. Is there an interest in the following genre within this distributor? One thing to keep in mind, a lot of distributors have different needs in terms of different genres they tend to look at, and that can change quarterly, every 6 months, every year. It changing in the markets is something you need to just kind of be on top of. But you can only really be on top of it once you begin those conversations with them to begin, hey, and they say, no, actually, currently we're only interested in thrillers or action or comedy, what have you. And you tend to then begin to navigate yourself and your project into where it might fit. That journey can take some time, but during that journey, you tend to make a lot of connections and understand, hey, if I did write the following script, or I have a previous script that I wrote that actually could fit this, presenting them with a good package makes your project stand out versus others that you have to keep in mind. With the majors, you'll probably have a couple of hundred a week of submissions, submissions per week going towards them. So try to make yours stand out by having a realistic kind of budget in place, a good team. A lot of the times they look for your team as well. Who's going to be producing this? Who is the showrunner, as we always say? Do they have experience in running a project of this budget, if not more? So the package is definitely one thing. Having a good team behind you that can support you and bring credibility to your project goes a hell of a long way when it comes to distributors.
Let's talk about that part really fast, just because sometimes, we hear yes, have attachments, and then other times we hear don't have any attachments. So, what is a good attachment versus what is one that is actually going to hinder your movement forward? I mean, in terms of like credits, do you want only attachments for people that are have great credits? Is it the number of credits? How does that stand with you?
It does help,
Mhm.
absolutely, but I don't think it's the sometimes it's not the main deciding factor. What happens if a distributor really likes the project? And again, you can get a number of kind of different deals from them. They may very much like it, and they may have discussions with you about acquiring the IP or really working with you and bringing in their showrunners from their studios to actually make this happen. There are many different, I think, aspects to that, and not to get kind of into that because that in itself is a whole nother conversation.
Sure.
But having accredited individuals, it's much like any other company, is
Yeah.
showing that, hey, I have the following, for instance, chief tech officer of my tech company who has 30 years experience, goes a long way when it comes to an investor investing. Equally for a film, I have a producer who's done X amount of films or has X amount of experience, adds that additional level of credibility to.
What if your team though is like, let's say you've made 4 short films
Mhm.
and now you're ready to make your feature and you have your team and they don't really have any credits except the stuff that you've all done together. Is
Mhm.
that helpful or is that something you should not include in?
Definitely helpful. It
Okay.
shows experience. It shows you've been there, you've done your homework, you understand what it means to have a certain budget and to work within that and to achieve
Mm,
something. It goes a long, long way, absolutely. So it's not to discredit people who don't have the credits.
mhm.
They've done the work, they understand the process, they need this experience to get on to the next one and so
Right.
on. But also equally, if you have someone credible, it adds that
Yeah.
additional.
So it's kind of like you'd ideally want both. You want your solid team that work well together if that's the case, and then maybe see if you can go after somebody who has a credit that is impressive
Correct.
or years in the industry or something to sort of jump on
Mhm.
and be you know, that sort of like lighthouse
Correct.
essentially.
That kind of voice of experience
Yeah.
there, it goes a long way. Absolutely, absolutely. We tend to look at both sides. Yeah,
Okay, good. And then will you just talk about the difference between going to a sales agent and going to a distributor?
sure. Absolutely. So with the sales agents, you effectively they're going to evaluate your project in terms of kind of domestic and internationally, what kind of markets you'll be able to go, and generally they'll look at historically the type of film you're going to make and what has been bought and sold previously, and they'll give you these estimations of the low, mid, and highs, which is always a good indicator, especially if you go to an accredited or a well-known sales agent or agency. Those numbers can actually work to the filmmaker's advantage. Whether those are going to allow financiers, private financiers, to actually invest based on that, or be able to cash flow some of that, or what have you. Distributors, well, distributors can have all of that within. So you can have a distributor that does the sales side and also has direct access to the of selling these directly to licensing them. Sorry, they will acquire it from you and then sells the licenses over to the Netflixes, the Amazons, the Skies, and the others. So it's sometimes good to find a distributor that does both. That in-house they give you the sales and they'll take the film off your hand for a certain price, which means then it's off your hand. They've acquired it.
Mm.
Now they go and stream it and license it to other platforms. So there's a distinct distinction, but I think they are beginning to kind of come together as much of the industry is beginning to kind of amalgamate into one.
Okay. And do sales agents will they look at a script or are they mostly looking at films that are completed? It feels like the sales agent is more like completed films, but will they look at a script?
They do look at a script. You can get early on sales estimates of what you think based on the following cast, based on the following genre, and they'll review the script, and then they'll provide their feedback of based on your genre, based on the actors you have, and historically based on the type of film you're making. These are the most kind of realistic kind of figures that they can think of that would provide to you. And equally, so it's not that you need to finish it then go. It's a step actually at the very beginning I would advise to kind of take on.
Okay. Let's get into what you need like right away. So besides script, pitch deck, budget, and any sort of like team attachments, how important is it to have cast attachments? Because a lot of times it feels like, you reach out and you're like, I'd love if this person did it. And they're like, do you have any money? Right. So it's like, but you need the money to get them, but you can't get the money without the attachment. So
Yeah,
can you talk a little bit about that?
absolutely. The usual chicken and egg situation,
Yeah.
as everyone says. Absolutely. Obviously, if you have cast attached, director attached, and then you go for distribution and financing, it becomes a lot easier. You have kind of a full package. Now, if you don't have that and you're finding yourself in the middle of everything and going, well, what do I do? Because I need money to get the cast, and I need the cast to get the money. It's just kind of going back to the basics of making sure your package is strong, and then going to a distributor for market validation based on what you have, what the story is there an interest, then taking that to the financing to say, look, it's been market valid. Let's just say Sony is interested or Lionsgate is interested in my package to get this over the line. I have the following cast and I require the following amount of development in order to go out and secure the cast or put down at the very least the advancements for the cast. It becomes an easier conversation when you go to private capital market to kind of raise that, because again, that should be the hopefully fixing of the chicken and egg situation, is actually going to distributors earlier on and potentially even sales agencies and agents to get some figures in and get the initial interest in, go to financing, secure some financing in order to secure the rest. And vice versa. You can probably at that point, if you have some connections and network, you can go to cast and say, hey, look, I've got Lionsgate interested, or A24 or Neon or others, they're interested. I have the following sales. Can I attach you in order to get the financing in place? It gives you a lot of leverage to be able to go after both at that time.
And would you recommend going through an actor's manager or agent, or try to go to them if you can directly?
If you can directly, again, really go to them. Obviously, the beautiful thing about this film industry is, as much as I have a strategy that we generally tend to advise on and look at, there are many different ways of going about it. It's all about connections. It's all about when the right moment has popped up and you're like, hey, I need to grab onto that opportunity and ride it. So I would say, in terms of cast, if you have a direct connection, go to them and talk to them. But ultimately, it'll be to go through their agents, which can be a tough job. Their agents are there to protect their basically the actors and the actresses from far too many applications coming to them, to really guide them through the good ones. But at the same time, they also tend to say no too often and miss out on great opportunities that usually ends up landing on others, and they take it. And it's quite a famous Hollywood stories where you hear, for instance, Will Smith didn't do the Matrix or what have you. All of these opportunities are here and there when it comes to film. So I would advise, if you have direct access, go after it. Otherwise, alternatively, to go through their agents.
Okay, we're going to get into the distribution and the fundamentals of all of this, but I just want to ask one more question about that. Now with social media presence, and like those numbers, Do you think that like finding somebody, let's say they're not, Jennifer Lawrence, but there's somebody who has an online presence, has an acting, is an actor, but also an influencer. Is that someone smart to attach? Are influencers smart to attach to projects? Are no names okay to attach to projects? Or are you only looking to attach a name?
I think it's a mixture of all of that. It depends on the audience you're going after. So it's
Okay.
really about your project and the audiences. So there have been other projects we've reviewed where it was primarily influencers with millions of followers. That was the main cast, and there was just a very vanilla storyline that was
Mhm.
written to just kind of bring them all together, put them on screen, and hope in hopes that the amount of followers they have would actually help market the film, and basically distribute it and get the financing profits all in place. But that sometimes works,
Mhm.
sometimes it doesn't work. Again, it's about the target, what you're going after, what your storyline is, the audience that you're going after. So if your film is something very serious, it's a drama, I would advise to at the very least have a name, a known name. Doesn't have to be an A-lister, just a known name
Mhm.
attached, and there can be a few unknowns, potentially an influencer in there, but you will at the bare minimum need to have a known name attached.
Okay.
Yeah,
For drama. Yeah. For
just
for genre pieces, you can tend to not need a huge name, correct? I
correct,
think drama
correct.
is like its own specific category essentially.
That's correct. It's all
Yeah.
about knowing your audience.
Yeah.
What is this script that you've written? Who is it for? And what is it that you're trying to get? And then the rest of the pieces should begin to come together.
Okay, great. Let's talk about distribution routes that filmmakers should know about today. Can you talk a little bit about different distribution pathways?
Yeah, sure. So with distribution, I think one pathway I always tend to advise filmmakers on is which distributor have you made your film for? Because you've a good example is A24 has a very unique way of telling their stories,
Mhm.
wanting to shoot their stories and putting it out there versus a Sony, versus a Universal, and others. And it's about kind of sometimes not only just knowing your audience, it's knowing who your distributor, who's your ultimately who's going to buy your project.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of again becomes this like you are selling and you need to know your buyer. You need to
Mm.
create. If you're creating a chocolate, that then I know, okay, this is going to be for kids, and I'm gonna, okay, now it's going to be a shape of a clown. Now I know it's going to be for, so it's about knowing your buyer, and whether those are going to be. A good one was, for instance, Bridget Jones, the film that came out last year, which was one of the latest installments of the franchise. The I went to see this film with my wife, and I sat there going, "Oh, I don't. I think they kind of ruined it because it didn't quite match what I thought." But I had a lady next to me who was well into her 50s and plus, who actually resonated with the story very well. She was emotional about it. She loved it, and we even had a conversation after it, and that just showed me that it's about who you go after, because that film actually became a huge success. It generated massive profits. And that was because they specifically targeted an age group and a demographic, and they went after that. And equally, a filmmaker she needs to also have that knowledge. I'm writing this story. It's not just for you, especially if you want to make this. If you want to sell it, you want the audiences to see it. Who is your audience? Who are you writing this for? So it's always good to identify that earlier on, because then it helps you with your distribution path. Understanding, right, I need to go to a Neon because they are more for about international projects, international storylines, or I need to go to a Legendary because they make such epic films, and I think my film is epic on that scale, and the story is on that scale. So it's about understanding again where you take it. Um,
Are there smaller distribution companies? I mean, I know that we're talking about like the big ones, but I feel like, when we're talking about A24, that feels totally unreachable for somebody who maybe doesn't have representation or doesn't have a way in there. Are there places that you can go that are maybe not those top places? Or do
Sure.
those top places, will they take unsolicited,
Yeah,
material?
that's a good question, because a lot of the times with the majors, it's about having solicited
Mhm.
projects that they accept. And then there are many, I would say, mid-sized distributors that are very much about I would say, the early filmmakers, or in general indie filmmakers, and they have their own deals with the majors. So they would acquire from the filmmakers their projects. They would analyze them. Sometimes even they are big enough to provide minimum guarantees, which are actually bankable, which is great, which helps the filmmakers actually make their films. So there are many of them there. And what I would advise filmmakers right now is AI can, as much as it can be your enemy in terms of, I understand, taking away some creativity, it can really be your kind of guide in terms of, show me a list of
Research,
mid-level, mid-sized distributors that I can approach and who would be the right people for me to go to.
yeah.
Social media has kind of changed that. And I would say that kind of explicit network that used to only be known to certain agents and certain legal firms that you had to go through, now you have access in terms of reaching out and talking to these people kind of more directly. A lot of the times you'll find there are smaller distributors popping up here and there. They tend to look for certain types of films um, within certain level kind of budget levels. As your budget levels goes higher, you should also look at higher and higher kind of distributors as well.
Are there any, I mean, besides like, going on to AI and sometimes the information is like old or not the right person. Do you know of any resources of distribution companies that would be useful to filmmakers? Or is it really sort of like, the Wild West still where you have to sort of create your own lists?
It's a good question. No, I mean there are a lot more resources now. I think it's funny, on Reddit, on other
Mm.
sites as well, on Google in general. A lot of filmmakers who have gone through this experience time and time again have actually created resources for people, and are there to kind of answer a lot of questions of, hey, I have the following type of film, where can I go with it? Or equally, there are databases on. It's as simple as typing in thriller genre distribution in
Mhm.
US or in whichever country you're in. It tends to provide that, and there are filmmakers who've created lists on many social media platforms. It's hard to name all of them because there's
Mhm.
just so many platforms out there. But in general, there is a lot more resources now for filmmakers to be able to understand where their film can kind of fit. Um, yeah, yeah,
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think as much as we don't want AI to be writing things and creating things for us, it is actually really it's efficient when you need to research. And then you have to do the research from those lists to make sure that they're accurate and current and all of that stuff.
exactly. Always do your own research, but it's a tool there nonetheless to provide you as I always say, it's a good foundation, and then
Mhm.
for you to take it from there. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about um let's see. What elements of a project? So let's say you have a contained thriller
Hmm.
and you don't have you maybe have a director attached, but you don't have any cast. What in that realm, what elements of that project or a project similar to that tend to create interest? Are there specific things that you put into your letter to a distributor or to an investor that are like, what do they want to hear? Essentially, I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Sure. It again, depending on your package, it's about how you frame every. I usually advise that every aspect of your film is marketable, is sellable, and it should be. from your locations to your location tax credits to your, is it a single location shoot? There are a lot of benefits to that, especially nowadays. Is it a kind of a more multi-location shoot across the US or across the globe? There are all these different aspects a film has that should be used as not so much as a weapon, but as a selling point if they are positioned correctly within your package. So if you have a director, that's great. Does the director have previous work that they've done? You utilize that and use why they're perfect for this project. There's always the question that comes to us is, why are they filming in this location instead of, for instance, here? Why is it this director, not this director? Your justification for all of that are your selling points to us as the financiers or even to distributors, justifying your reasoning. Hence why the business aspect of your film is just as, if not more important than the script, than the storyline to some aspect, is because how you're selling it. We've seen films that really don't deserve to have been made, to some aspect, being made and put out into the market. And you're like, how did that get greenlit? It's the packaging was just so well put together. Every aspect of it was literally weaponized and used as a selling point. And it got made, it got that success hit. So as much as you spend time on the storyline and really tweaking it, making it the best story that you've ever written, you need to have equal amount of interest and passion into really writing up the right package, putting the right team together. All of those elements go together. When an investor sees the package is a great script, a great pitch deck, you've done your homework in terms of your budget, you really know your vendors. If they pull up on anything, hey, it says here 10,500 and XYZ for the following line item, who is that with? You have an answer. That's with the following vendor. I've already spoken to them. This is what they gave to me. It's knowing your project inside out makes it so much easier to sell than, and this happens, unfortunately, when we look at budgets, because we have to, our job is to make sure we're looking after our money, our investment, that, again, we're managing other people's monies and they've relied on us to make those investments on their behalf. We have to be absolutely diligent on the projects we make those investments into, the budgets that are reflective of that budget. Are they accurate? Does anything pop up? So sometimes, and this is more, I would say, in the past, but it does still happen, is where we tend to see inflated budgets, inflated line items, which don't quite make sense. The red flag that is for us is that maybe they're trying to skim some more money from the production side or from the music side or from the post side. If you can give us the confidence that's not what you're trying to do, that this is legitimately something based on vendors and actual reasons why you require this for your film, makes it all the more easier for us to go through that transition of, hey, actually this is investable.
Okay, you spoke earlier, and just again, and it kind of brought it back up for me, about sponsors or company partnerships. So how, when somebody, let's say, has an adventure film and they know that there's certain like camping or outdoor companies that, like Garmin or Patagonia or something, that would be really integrated into this story and it would be cool to include them. Would you advise filmmakers to go to those companies and ask if they're interested in sort of like an in-kind, sponsorship for the film, and then use that in your package?
Absolutely. We call that soft money. So that's monies that would come from the product placements. Highly recommend it, because that's one way, especially right now, the market is completely changing. Advertisers are seeing that, hey, people are not really looking at our commercials and they're not really paying too much attention to the product. However, they are watching films and they are paying attention to what the actors are holding, where the actors are, what's behind them, what's in front of them. All of these aspects are now starting to become a kind of a trend shift for advertisers, commercials, brands, where they realize that actually the more we can kind of support projects and put our products inside of them, pay a portion of their advertising budget towards these films actually benefits them.
Mm.
So filmmakers can actually benefit sometimes even in entirety of it, get their financing done through product placements. Again, depending on your size of your budget, but it's definitely something for filmmakers to look into to begin those conversations. Advertisers, brands are very interested in this space right now because there is a shift. There is generally a cultural shift happening, and it's actually a right time for those conversations to be had.
That's really cool. I think that just to sort of give an overview again of that, just a summary. Essentially, like if you don't have in your package great attachments or big money yet, be creative and really go through your film and find out those unique elements that stand out and how you can market those and how you're going to turn those and bring an audience, bring a profit, make a product placement deal, something like that. Are those all elements that are helpful when someone comes to you? Let's say they don't have a distributor yet, but they have like all these creative ideas and it looks like they know what they're talking about. Is that like enough to come to you?
It's depending on the project, it can be enough to gain our interest to say, hey, we love it. If you're pitching about a certain fizzy drinks story and you want to tell the founder's story of it, and it's a very well-known brand, and you're like, hey, I've written this project, this script, for instance. It's about the makers of this brand, and I'm going to go to them, but I'd like to have your backing. Sometimes that can be of a great interest because it means then, hey, this could actually work well if we support this project, and on the back of us already having those connections with the brands because we've already put those brands in multiple pictures, this can actually work very well. So I always tell filmmakers to take the risk, to take the chance, but also be careful because sometimes you go in too hard and you may burn that bridge. If you make a soft approach and always be very calculated, know your project, not just from the story and creative, but know it from a business stance, it can become a completely different story. So yeah, I would advise take the chance, but just be calculated.
Yeah, be calculated and creative and maybe try to find fun in it because I know this is the daunting part, but it does get exciting when you come up with like a really cool strategy. We want to get to, I know a lot of you guys have put in a bunch of questions, so I want Poya to kind of look at those. But Poya, did you want to go through any of your slides that you had to talk about, or do you want to just continue? Is there anything that I'm missing in terms of stuff that you want to talk about? I would like to talk about like what a filmmaker should do first and just like an order in the next 30 days, 60 days if they have their script in their deck. But yeah, I want to make sure that we're covering everything that you want to cover before we get into
I think the one thing we need to cover was on the tax credit side.
Yes,
I'd love to cover that because that is just such a huge portion of the financing. You know, it could be between 25 to 30 to 50%, sometimes even more, if you're in the right location and you're going after the right location. And this is for all the filmmakers on this right now. I think to really understand, does your project absolutely have to be, for instance, in one place where the maximum tax credits are 25% versus another location where the tax credits are actually 40%, because that's 40% of your entire budget, or that can be secured if you shoot there. Can you make adjustments to your story to make that happen? There are other places, not just in the US, but in Canada, where you can get up to 50 to 60% of that in place. That's amazing. Mix that in with some soft money from sponsors, plus a little bit of perhaps even debt in terms of kind of mezzanine or gap. You can have a complete picture. So there are different ways of going about it. It's about, and again, outside of and over the ocean on this side, where UK is now offering up to 35 to almost 39% tax credits. You have in the Middle East right now, there are some regions offering even up to 100% financing if you shoot in those locations. There so the tax credit world, I highly advise everyone here to really get to know yourselves, dive in there, look at them. Again, I advise is use AI to kind of help guide you as your initial kind of stepping stone to finding out about globally where are the best tax credits. There are some areas where they even provide above the line tax credits up to about 25-30%, which means your cast could entirely be covered by just that tax credit, which is great. So highly recommend everyone to look into that. That can be a very big cornerstone advantage to everyone here.
Awesome. I love that. Did you want to show any of your slides? I know you have some slides, or do you just want to share that with people after?
I think we can share that with everyone. I think we've kind of covered most of it. Yeah.
Okay. And let's just talk about, before we get to these questions, if you want to just start looking at the starred questions on the side in your thing, you can kind of pick out some that you want to answer that you feel are appropriate. I guess my last question before we move into those specific questions from people, because everyone's like typing like, what about this? What about that? What do you think are the biggest misconceptions that filmmakers have just in general about finding financing for their films?
So finding financing for your films right now, I think is actually a good time, because a lot of the private markets, which is what we're in terms of private equity and others, especially since I would say COVID, indie projects have been on a massive rise. I mean, they were kind of there, but not as big as the shift that we've seen really from indie filmmakers, actors now starring in indie films a lot more than they used to. There's this giant shift happening across the entire industry, where now private markets and private equity companies are beginning to really see the advantage of this. Now, they have been burnt quite a bit before, so they're very, very cautious when they're getting into it. Hence why I advise know your project, know your finances, know the audiences you're going after. You're ultimately pitching a product to private equity companies, institutions, and funny enough, there are even certain banks that are beginning and considering investments into indie-based projects, whether that's debt or equity. And there are distributors that are kind of shifting. So the major financiers behind a lot of these distributors are now considering, maybe we want to also have a skin in the game on some of these projects, and therefore not only giving you a distribution deal, but coming in with some sort of a debt or / equity financing and have a piece of the game in there if they really believe in the package. So there are a number of different ways to kind of get their projects financed. I've known filmmakers who've put together money from themselves as well as family money, friends money, and they've managed to put together a large sum that allowed them to actually get over development, and by doing so allowed them to go into pre-production because they managed to get some sort of a distribution deal on the back of really prepping the project. There are other ways of going about this where, again, a strong package gets you into that door and gets the interest. So and I think attending a lot of these events, whether they're in America, like film events, whether that's the American film market or whether that's Cannes or what have you, I say they're very important for filmmakers to go there, not necessarily pitching their ideas, but networking. In this industry, a lot of it is about who you know,
right,
and under what circumstances you got to know that individual or that company or the group. You just never know. So I highly advise filmmakers to really interact and get involved into those.
Right. It's sort of the long game. Like,
Correct.
don't go to those assuming that you're going to sell something in that moment, but if you establish a relationship in not a desperate way, then it does help you as you move forward, because those are people you can reach out to.
Correct. I think it's all about taking the time it needs to happen whilst you're exploring every other avenue as well. But building that network will help you not only on this film, but your next film and so on. It's about repeat business with a lot of these private investors. You want to be able to say, hey, I did this film, you made some money. How about you reinvest some of that back into my next film? and I want to go a little bit bigger. And they may even bring at that point other groups, other individuals, other family offices in to invest in with you.
And for your specific company, I know that that we're going to share a great offer for
Sure.
consultations with you. What kinds of budgets do you look at? Are you looking at, below $1 million, or are you looking somewhere between, like, do you have parameters for types of budgets that you're looking for?
Yeah. We generally tend to, so with Black Deer, we generally tend to look at kind of I would say the higher tier indies, where they are in the 15 to 20 kind of million range higher. But then you also have direct investors, family offices, ultra high net worth individuals who are actually looking to kind of make more direct investments, not through a firm. And those numbers could relatively go from the 500,000s to the millions to up to the 10 to 15 million kind of range. So again, but there are other firms out there which have a lower threshold as well. Ours is just generally higher. It just we tend to really want that kind of 0.1% of the industry's kind of scripts for us to look into. Others have a wider reach, wider need, and they go for the 3 to 5 and 5 to 10 millions.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so questions, let's get to those. Last question for you, and this is just sort of a personal thing I wanted to know. You said that at the beginning that you started sort of, as a producer, and you got thrust into this side of things. How long did it take you to sort of feel like you understood film financing?
It was something I've been working on back and forth for quite a while. Whilst I had my company and we were working through the following projects you see and many others, I kind of started to understand how financing works, but there was a lot of myth around it. And generally there tends to be this ambiguity of doing it the right way and how to really get each project done. Because again, there are so many different avenues. The avenues I've mentioned are just a set of them.
Mm-hmm.
There are others who think actually if you do it this way is better, and others who would disagree with that and say actually it's better to do it this way. Mm-hmm. Everyone has had their successes in those methods, and they're all right in their way. So I think for me it took a good year and a half to really get my head around it, because I was trying to understand between how we are financing it under the company and the firm that I'm in versus how others are doing it, and trying to see, well, is our approach the best way to do this, or is it theirs is the best way? And what I understood is that there really isn't the best way. It's just rather what works for each project and what works for us as a firm versus what works potentially for a filmmaker. Sometimes, for instance, even with us, there might be the terms might be a bit too aggressive, and therefore it may not be workable for some filmmakers. Others would be comfortable with that. So it's about the filmmakers really understanding, okay, this firm is the following. I'll come back to them maybe later, but this firm or this company or this family office or this individual has the following terms, and I'll work with them now. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to know a little bit about like how long it took you to sort of wrap your head around everything and feel like that you understood. Because I think we're all sort of like, what? Trying to figure it out. And I love that you said there's no best way. It's just what works best for your project. Because yeah, I mean, people do this in a bunch of different ways, but we're all trying to figure it out. Let's get to these questions. So can you see the starred ones that
I can see.
Okay. Do you want to look, are there any that kind of stick out to you? I know that one that stuck out to me was talking about the difference between streamer and theatrical, digital distributors can you talk, does that make a difference? Like, should you have that in mind?
Absolutely. Actually, it's a very good question, because when it comes to going down the streamer route or theatrical, one thing you've got to keep in mind is when it comes to theatrical, and again, the understanding and the want of audiences has really changed since 2020. When you go to theaters, people really want to spend, because this is all economics. It all really drops down to economics. When someone goes to the theater, they're spending X amount of money traveling there, X amount of money to have some food before it, or to buy some popcorn and drinks. to buy those tickets, to sit down, then again to spend money getting home and so on. So there's a lot of money economics happening in a world where right now everything's on the rise, and cost of living is an issue. So audiences really want to invest their money to go to big events when it comes to
Mhm.
kind of like theaters, the Dunes, the others, and so on. Unless your film is kind of that level now, or unless you have certain attachments that are very big, and you're kind of confident that this should maybe be shown there, and you can get maybe a very limited theatrical release in a very certain specific area, or even that's globally becomes very limited. Um, it's good to also think about when you go theater, you are exposing your project to the world where everyone will be able to see what your box office hits were. And
Mm.
when people see that as a producer or as a filmmaker, they'll look at that and go, right, your film went theatrical, and it was let's just say a $4.5 million film, but it actually generated only 500,000. It will be difficult for you to justify that later, because filmmakers, investors would look at that and say, well, your last film, and we always say, it's a very big saying in the industry, goes, you're only as good as your last film. Your last film will only generate X amount, and you actually lost money for
Mhm.
the investors and so on. So it's you have to be careful of that balance. If you really wanted to go theatrical, you have to be really confident your project is worth that. And then if you're chasing theatrical, then you better make sure you have the right attachments and also the right distributor behind it. And negotiating with distributors is a whole nother, I would say it's almost a negotiation tactics that you're going to require. But so versus streaming doesn't actually put any information about how much they purchased your project. It's completely confidential. You sell it, you usually make some returns, your investor makes their returns, and your project is on a stream, on a Netflix, on Amazon, on a Hulu, and then you move on to the next. I would say that level of kind of anonymity is good for initial filmmakers to get themselves and a foot into the door prior to them thinking, okay, theatrical.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you. Are there any other of these questions? Let's see.
I think there was one about very low, um, kind of low budgets, which I think is actually a very good and interesting one, and quite a quick answer for that. So if your project is within the 50,000, 100,000, up to 200,000, and slightly more than that, I would actually advise you to go down the route of product placements and sponsorships and soft monies, because you'll often find they'll relatively pay well for you to feature some of their products in there. Amazon is a great prime example of, if you're featuring an Amazon product, they generally tend to
Hmm.
give quite a good sum in there. But again, there are rules and regulations around how that works. But as an example, so if you're making it for low, either you're self-funding it or you're getting sponsorships on board, and they generally tend to give a good amount. Again, it's about making sure your package, even if it's a small project, if your package is strong enough and you have some way of distributing this
Mm.
in a good manner that a lot of people will be able to see it, product placement could be your best friend in that case.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. What about how do you vet? This is a good one. Is there a good way to vet a sales agent or distributor just in terms of like, reputation?
Mhm. Look at the teams. I would advise to look at their teams and who they've previously worked with, and
Mm.
look at their roster of generally who these salespeople tend to work with. So it's worth noting if they'll mention it, or we work directly with Universal, we provide them sales, or we are kind of their outsourced kind of vendor, and we provide these things. Those are generally good signs. They usually advertise a lot of this on their website, because it gives confidence for filmmakers to come to them and get their services on board. So have a look at those when you go onto just see who their team is, and again, who they're represented, or generally who they work with. Should be a good indicator whether they are, I would say, industry vetted versus kind of non-industry vetted, where then their sales figures can become a bit, is that correct? Is that really what I can get for it, or is it not accurate? So yeah.
Are there any red flags that you should look out for?
Inflated, I would say, fees. So sometimes they'll put 15, 25% fees that they would want on the back end, or something ridiculous like that. Usually that's an indicator for that. So be careful of the back end, the amount of back end fees they tend to kind of want. Yeah, if it's very high, it's questionable. And always kind of get I would say a second quote if possible, to kind of compare and see the exact differences. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, do proof of concepts, teasers, do those help projects in terms of packaging?
Massively, actually. I think they go a long way, because it shows, you're showing your vision. A lot of people nowadays, a lot of investors, family offices, private equity, can be quite visual in terms of, oh, this looks really good, and it's kind of like a shiny object. But then they will dive into looking under the bonnet and really seeing how, if there's an engine, if there's this. So make it as shiny as you can, make it as interesting as you can. If you can have, right now with some people, what they tend to have is they generate like a 1-minute kind of trailer with AI nowadays, to kind of show, this is the mood, this is the style, this is what I'm trying to kind of get. And as much as perhaps filmmakers may be against that, if you're going for a private markets, they see that as a bonus, that, hey, you're actually using something to show me and convey to me what you're trying to build. So it can really work. Yeah, it can really work.
Right. Okay. Let's ask Craig, who's the founder of ISA's question. If a project is fully financed as equity only, what's the greatest potential for return once totally completed? Would you recommend film fest, distributors, other?
Depends on the genre. So if it's basically it's fully packaged, everything is there. Taking it to events like that can be actually really, really good. Again, what you do is you start kind of a bidding war, because all the distributors are there. They're all there to kind of see what they can acquire and what kind of deals they can make. Having everything in place at that point, going to a festival like that, absolutely. You can kind of start a bidding war at that stage, especially if it's all equity, then it's very rare, but it can be very good. Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's see. There's lots of questions about this product placement. I guess the question, I mean, it's pretty simple. How do you reach out to a company for product placement?
Go after their marketing department. Quite literally, find a marketing executive or the marketing manager. Reach out to them on a LinkedIn or what have you. Explain about why their product would be good fit for your project and why your film is a good fit for theirs. If it's a horror and you're using an axe from a certain brand, and you're like, hey, I think I'd love to have this kind of, they may say no, because of like, I don't want my access
the content of it. Yeah.
So you have to be clever about how you're going about product placements and finding the right reason. I want the Range Rover in my film because the main protagonist, the good guy, the good people are driving it. It usually comes from a good place, versus, hey, the bad guy who's a cartel who is doing X, Y, Z is going to be representing your car. It can become a bit tricky on the back and forth. So just smartly positioning your product placements can work to your benefit.
Yes, it has to make them look good and cool and highlight their product in the right way. This is a good one. How soon is too soon to apply for a film tax credit? Is that like, when do you apply for that?
When you have, I think, everything in place, it's just part of your plan. Just needs to state, I'm going to, I don't know, LA, and I need the following things, but don't get everything in place before you actually have the package in place. Actually, it's a good question, because a lot of filmmakers actually go ahead and try to get tax credits before they have the full financing in place. and puts them in a bit of an awkward position when they actually don't have the finances come in at the right time, and they need to submit their application by a certain date because they've already triggered that. I would always advise is to know where you want to go, but wait, and only go after when you know you have your full package that includes your entire financing kind of locked in, or at the very least committed, before
Mhm.
you begin that process. Yeah.
Okay. Another good question. What is there value in terms of getting coverage from places like Slated or Greenlight? Is that of any value when you're
It
going out?
does. It does kind of give value in terms of the first initial look. So Slated is fantastic. They really do a great job with what they have. I love it. You know, I know a lot of our team and partners, they do love it. I think it's a great starting point. Certainly having that in place, and I think as Slated continues to grow, I think they are going to become kind of one of the dominant kind of companies in the field. So definitely, the data that you get from them is workable. Yeah.
Okay, cool. It is 1 o'clock, so we're going to try to end this. But Poya, thank you so much. I feel like you gave so much great actual information that we can use and move forward. I feel much more educated and excited. I feel excited because I have a couple projects, you know. So for everybody who's here, you're going to get an email with the overview sort of like deck that Poya is going to share. And then also there is an offer if you are looking for personal consultation. Poya is offering a really great deal. So you can reach out to his company via the email that you receive and do a personal consultation about your project. And it will lay out exactly what you need and everything like that for that meeting. So thank you, Poya. This was amazing.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, and thank you for everyone joining in. I hope it was useful information, and I wish you all the best in your endeavor to make the films. Yeah.